A very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for finding time to be with us this day. The show is Diaspora Dispatches. My name is Miriam Ogutu, and it is a pleasure to have you on board this afternoon. And I'd like for us to just highlight one of the key concerning news items that have been carrying out in the recent past, actually over the past couple of years, and that is the insecurity in Nigeria. A very good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, depending on where you're tuned in and watching us from this day. And as we know, Nigeria is gearing up to its elections, and the presidential election will be held on the 25th of February 2023 to elect the president and vice president of Nigeria. Incumbent APC President Muhammadu Buhari is term limited and cannot seek a re-election for a third term. There are, of course, other elections that will also take place together with the presidential elections on the same day, and that is the federal elections, including elections to the House of Representatives and the Senate. This will also be held on the same date, while state elections will be held 2 weeks afterwards, and that is on the 11th of March. But the recent rising insecurity in the country is now threatening the date of these elections and this very important exercise in Nigeria's democracy. Now, I'd like to take us just a couple of years back. In the 1967-1970 Nigerian Civil War brought several baggage items that aggravated the country's security situation. First, it worsened the ethnic mistrust between the Igbos and perhaps all other ethnic groups, particularly the Hausa and the Fulani communities. And maybe the distrust made it extremely challenging for a Nigerian southern eastern origin to become the country's president. And of course, further fueling the perceived marginalization of the military of the region in the power control equation. And second, of what could have come out of that civil war in Nigeria, the Biafran War. The civil war seemingly legitimized the direct and indirect military hold on power for quite a long time. Even the country leaders in subsequent democratic dispensations were past military heads of states, except for one, Shehu Shagari and Umar Yar'Adua, and of course, Goodluck Jonathan. Now, something else that could have come out of the Biafran War, or otherwise known as the Nigerian Civil War, is an arguably amplified the level of crime and violence in the social cultural environment of Nigeria that has kept popping up and has taken different twists with the introduction of groups like Boko Haram now, also intensifying the state of insecurity in Nigeria. And fast forward years later, Nigeria is at crossroads now with security that seems to have gotten out of hand. The country is battling whether to classify bandits as terrorists or just as criminals keen on kidnapping for ransom. Recently, officials decided to categorize bandits as terrorists, which would allow security forces to consider their threats as dangerous and use weapons which would otherwise draw criticism. And I think this is one of the key things that I think we've had a problem with every time we look at the situation of Nigeria as far as its security is concerned. Because when you look at some of these attacks that have been carried out by the so-called bandits, they're quite gruesome, and you can't tell them apart from those attacks and those which are being carried out by Boko Haram. They all have a similar way of doing things. They all terrorize people. They all maim people. They all get people out of their homes. They're all in a similar fashion. So the fact that the Nigerian government and the leadership of Nigeria took so much time still arguing how to classify this terrorist group, I think just goes to show that perhaps, the reluctance that has been witnessed when it comes to dealing with the issue of insecurity in Nigeria, as far as the leadership that is now being led by President Muhammadu Buhari is concerned. And remember, when he was being elected for the first time in 2008, one of the key promises that President Buhari had made was that he will eradicate Boko Haram within a span of the first 100 days of his leadership. That has not happened. In fact, Boko Haram has grown in leaps and bounds under his leadership. But as we continue with the show, I will perhaps bring us Buhari's thoughts on what he thinks and how he feels he has performed as far as addressing the issue of Nigeria's insecurity is concerned. And beside atrocities, the bandits have seized some remote communities in 12 states of Northwest and North Central, imposed illegal levies and taxes on people, as well as destroyed social infrastructure, especially schools, telecom and electricity facilities. The bandits, as known as terrorists like Boko Haram, kill, maim, kidnap and rape women in the troubled states of Zamfara, Sokoto, Kebbi, Katsina, Kaduna, Niger, and Kogi, Benue, and Jigawa, Plateau, and other FST. Buhari expected to leave his post in 2023, like I have mentioned. Nigerians are going to the elections on the 25th of next month, and he wants the forces to eliminate the banditry problem before the end of 2022, and of course that deadline was missed. Unfortunately, that was what he had said a couple of months ago, that he wanted to leave Nigeria that is free from banditry and these other insecurity causing groups by the end of 2022. I don't know how, just evaluating how things are in Nigeria, what President Buhari has to say for himself as far as that promise or that aspiration he had is concerned. Now, banditry is, however, older than Buhari's administration. It started as a farmers versus herders crisis in 2011 and initially considered to be a passing cloud, but it has ballooned into a full-blown terrorism, displacing over 2.1 million people. In Zamfara state, for instance, about 69,000 internally displaced persons. Kaduna has about 71,000 internally displaced persons. Katsina has 61,000 people who have been displaced from the banditry activities. Sokoto, 45,000. And while at least 3,000 have crossed the borders through the axis of Maradi to take refuge in Niger and Chad republics. One of the farmers in this area said that, who's being interviewed in a certain documentary I was just watching, said that they end up paying even to a tune of 1.2 million naira, or that is equivalent to 2,500 US dollars, to allow them to access and cultivate their farmlands. So these criminal groups have taken over these villages. And for you to even farm your land, you have to pay tax to them for you to be allowed. So this would sound like a country, that is under anarchy, a country that has no central government, a country whose security apparatus is non-existent. But this is not such a country. This is Nigeria, where it is the most populous country in the continent and the country that with the highest GDP in the continent. So you wonder, what is really going on? Is Nigeria becoming a banana republic? If you have a criminal group taking over villages upon villages and running its agenda, taxing its people, where are the security apparatus in Nigeria? Why have you not seen a response that will deter these kinds of activities that have now been widespread in Nigeria? Can you imagine? That's how much they pay. Just a normal farmer, 2,500 US dollars for you to farm your land in some of these areas. And the Nigerian Red Cross Society has confirmed the fear of imminent food insecurity in the Northwest and North Central, saying the situation is critical and is one that needs immediate response. And the governors of these affected states are really frustrated with this problem because it keeps increasing, like I've mentioned there. And Governor Abubakar Sani Bello of Niger State expressed his helplessness over the incessant invasion of bandits on various communities in his state. Some 50 villages are now occupied by bandits. 50 villages. First of all, why are we calling them bandits? These are terrorists. These are people who are out there to cause loss of lives. These are people who are out there to make sure that they terrorize the lives of people. So we can't keep calling them bandits. And the fact that I think this is a conversation that they're having on how to categorize these individuals, it's just bothersome, because as long as we keep calling them bandits, then they will not be treated with the level of seriousness and the level of force that they should be treated with, because you're just looking at them as if it's just another banditry activity, and yet this is has all the hallmarks of what these other terrorist groups are doing in places like Nigeria, Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab in Somalia and other areas across the continent of Africa and indeed across the world. Now, let me just bring us very quickly with the recent casualties from these insecurity incidences. And on 83 people were killed on December 20th, 2022 in Mutunji in Maru local government area of northwest Zamfara state. Shows and of course the Nigerian Air Force jets dropped bombs that killed about 215 persons, and most of them were bandits, but also civilians were caught up in this ambush, and a good number of them died. After almost 6 months of negotiations, the unconfirmed claims of payment of ransom, the last batch of the 23 captives from the train that was derailed in March. Remember, we talked about it here. A train was derailed and a good number of people were kidnapped. And in October last year, about 23 of those captives were released after a lot of negotiations and, of course, the payment of this ransom that goes to huge amounts of money that they ask for. In fact, these kidnaps for ransom has become just another enterprise in Nigeria, except that it has taken a very ugly turn, that it is done in a way, it's just bad, period. There's no difference between them and Boko Haram, like I've said there before. Now, on June last year, more than 30 people were murdered in another terrorist attack. This one was in a church in Owo in Ondo State. And on July 5th, armed men attacked a minimum security prison in Kuje, a community within the Federal District about 40 kilometers from Abuja. And during the attack, for which the Islamic State of West Africa province claimed responsibility, around 900 inmates escaped, including more than 40 Boko Haram suspects. Security analysts have also heightened the involvement of an Ansaru, an Al-Qaeda-backed splinter faction of Boko Haram, in the attack, though the extent of its involvement is unclear. So this brazen attack on a prison, and that they got to release over 900 inmates. This happened last year in July. Can you imagine? Can you imagine that? Okay, so on July 25th, all right, the attack in the prison happened on July 5th. And these are just the ones that the media is able to highlight. There are other incidences that don't get to make it to the attention of the international world. And on July 25th, unidentified assailants killed 6 officers of the Presidential Guard Brigade, an elite force of the army responsible for protecting the president and the federal area in Bwari, a community in the Federal Region where a campus of the Nigerian Law School is located. The officers are deployed to provide security after the management of the law school received a letter from unidentified sources threatening an imminent attack to the school. We all remember that. And in response, the Federal Education Ministry announced the immediate closure of all federal government colleges in the Federal Region to ensure students' safety, affecting thousands of students. And still staying with July 29th, media reported that gunmen attacked a military checkpoint in the Federal Region along the Abuja-Kaduna highway, which has become notorious in recent years for kidnappings and other attacks against citizens. I'm just highlighting some of these, incidences that have been we've been covering and we've been watching happen. But this is just a tip of the iceberg of what has been happening in Nigeria as far as just last year alone. And on the 24th of July, again last year, video surfaced on social media showing kidnapped victims of the March attack by suspected members of ISWAP on that train I was telling you about in Abuja, headed for Kaduna State, being beaten by their captors. In the video, members of the armed group threatened to kill or sell off the victims as captives to others if the government did not adhere to their demands, including the release of some ISWAP members and payment of for ransom. And they also threatened to kidnap President Muhammadu Buhari and other government officials, yes, they did actually threaten to kidnap President Buhari and other government officials. And I remember that time, I think there were reports that there was some imminent attack that was looming even on Nigerian's parliament. And so security was beefed up around that time. So meanwhile, the northwestern part of Nigeria, which includes President Buhari's home state of Katsina, has been enmeshed in crime and terror. Kidnappings, mass abductions, enforced disappearance, cattle rustling, and localized terror raids. Communities in the region have been displaced, and some are essentially held captive in their own homes by bandits and Islamist insurgents. Now, the North Central region, meanwhile, is still grappling with the farmer herder crisis, which became rife from around 1999. The crisis is often complicated by a mix of herder militancy and jihadi-style banditry, especially in parts of the Niger state. The southwest, including places like Lagos, has witnessed an upsurge of gang, cult, and ritual violence. This is in addition to the piracy and oil theft prevailing in the Niger Delta area. See, it's a cocktail of everything you can think about as far as insecurity is concerned. And at least about 7,222 Nigerians were killed and 3,823 abducted as a result of the 2,840 violent incidents between January 2022 to July 2022. At least 7,222 Nigerians died. And this is just the number of people who perhaps their cases can be reported. But this number is much higher than that. So between January and July 2022, 7,222 people were killed, while over 3,000, close to 4,000 of them were abducted. And this is from a total of 2,840 violent incidents that happened. Can you just pause and think about that? Between January and July last year, close to 3,000 incidences of these kidnappings and all this happened that resulted to over 7,000 people losing their lives, and a good number of them, almost 4,000, having been kidnapped, and others abducted, and others have been returned back to their loved ones, and others are still being held captive. Okay, so Nigeria's government at various levels appears ill-positioned to confront this problem. We have all seen that, and the response of its various security agencies has been largely poor, ineffective, and quite inactive. And we've seen how, I will get to how even some of the former presidents have reacted or have given their thoughts and their opinion on the state of insecurity in Nigeria. And in August 2022, a series of attacks and threats within close proximity of Nigeria's seat of government in Abuja by Islamists and other armed groups caused fear and apprehension among citizens in the Federal Capital Territory, FCT, and across the country. And this is according to a report by the Human Rights Watch there in Nigeria. Now, the Nigerian police force has assured citizens since then and even now that it has scaled up security in the federal region, which includes Abuja. But these attacks and threats, even kidnap, after they threatened to kidnap the president, indicate an alarming deterioration of the nation's security situation. The authorities need to ensure adequate security for all citizens at the same time respecting human rights. But has that been the case? I think you'll be the judge of that. Now, when all these incidences happen, especially mass abductions and kidnappings and killings and all these things, of course, President Buhari has been quick to send out a press release or to tweet something now that I think they have lifted the ban on Twitter, and his office has been very responsive in terms of sending condolences or just well wishes to the families or something like that. Now, in May 2022, President Buhari was displeased over the killings in Nigeria, and via his verified Twitter handle, he warned killers to expect toughest security response. That's what he said in May. In August 2022, after another incident of abduction, President Buhari declared that Nigeria's current security challenges have overstretched the deployment of security agencies and the nation's security. So in his admission, I think, this is what he was admitting, his government's inability to address effectively the issue of insecurity in Nigeria. He said that Nigeria, the country cannot fully, the country is overstretched. It's overstretched. And it does not have enough security personnel or what is really going on. But he said that the country security challenges have overstretched the deployment of security agencies and the nation's resources. So perhaps they're saying they don't have the arms needed, or they don't have whatever is required for the country to effectively address the issue of insecurity in Nigeria. But if I can recall very well, a couple of years ago, Boko Haram was becoming a serious thing in Nigeria. And when he had just been elected as the president, there are countries that offered to give him support and come in and help the government fight Boko Haram. But President Buhari was very categorical in refusing that help, and he said, that his government will handle this issue of insecurity. And for a long time, President Buhari kept, patting himself on the back, saying that his government has really done well as far as addressing the issue of insecurity is concerned. So for him to come in late in August last year, just a couple of days, months before he leaves office, and to just tell the country that the government is overstretched and the deployment of security agencies is overstretched and the nation's resources is also overstretched. In essence, he's admitting that his administration is unable to address the issue of insecurity. That is what he meant by that. I think this admission should have led the people of Nigeria to seek for accountability from the government's part, because your first responsibility as a head of state is to protect of your people and then the country. So if you are unable to do that, and you have exhibited great ineptness in doing that, then you have no business being a leader of any country. And I keep saying that. I keep saying that about Nigeria, and I keep saying that about South Sudan and these other countries. The leaders have failed, have done so poorly as far as addressing the issue of insecurity or security or lack thereof is concerned. So by President Buhari admission that his government was unable to deal effectively with the issue of insecurity, I think that in itself disqualified him. Former Major General, he is a former Major General, he's a former army official. If you cannot handle the issue of insecurity, President Buhari, then you have no business. But I guess it's a bit. And last year, just a couple of weeks before the year ended, he had said that he had a dream, I suppose, and he wanted to address the issue of insecurity before the end of 2022. Well, I guess today is what, the 10th? Is it, of January? And of course, that deadline has since passed that he had given himself the end of December last year. Nothing has been done. And matter of fact, just over the weekend, a gunman armed with AK-47 rifles abducted at least 32 people from a train station in Nigeria, southern Edo State. The governor's office confirmed on Sunday. We talked about that here. So things are just continuing to get worse as far as this insecurity issue is concerned. So President Buhari, you made that promise, and there's so many other promises you've made as far as handling the issue of security in Nigeria is concerned, that you have failed miserably to live up to these promises. And all you do is just tweet when something has happened. It's just tweet. But that is not enough. That is not enough as a head of state and commander-in-chief of Nigeria. I think you owe Nigerians more to that. But yet, then again, you only have a couple of days to leave office. But I think in several locations you say that you've done pretty well as far as handling the issue of security in Nigeria is concerned. Well, as I've said there earlier, Nigerians will have to judge that for themselves. Now, when he was saying that the government has been overstretched and the security agencies and resources have also been overstretched, however, said that the newly launched NCMD would strengthen the nation's security by bridging the gap created by extensive deployment of security services through the fostering collaboration. So these, what he called the NCMDs, amongst in collaboration with other ministries, departments and agencies. So according to him, the NCMD, which was developed by the Office of the National Security Advisor in coordination with the relevant departments and agencies and ministries, would ensure greater success in tackling the national crisis. So this was in August. I don't know, after setting up this office, if anything has changed. If anything has changed, and the manner in which they have been. You know, there's a debate they were having in Nigerian Senate, maybe about 2 years ago. And they were trying, at that time, I think there's an attack that has happened. And you know, I think Nigerian leadership, all of them, from the president or to the elected leaders there, they're very reactive in the manner in which they try to find solutions, very knee-jerk. So after an attack that happened, and so it became a debate in the Senate, and some of the solutions that these senators were trying to bring forth as a means to curb the spread of the insurgency and the extremism in the country were really quite surprising. I think there's one of them who said perhaps they need to promise these young men who are being recruited by Boko Haram, they need to find for them opportunities abroad to go study, and so perhaps talk to them and convince them to stop, being part of Boko Haram, and then, just have them go study abroad, or the ones they called repentant Boko Harams, they have them join army. And I said, wow, are you not making this criminal activity or criminal enterprise very lucrative? Because if some young men somewhere feel the only way they need to, in fact, they were supposed to go study abroad. The only way they have to go study abroad is by them coming and repenting, and then they'll be offered an opportunity to go abroad. You're not solving that problem. You're making it more lucrative. They will go commit people, and then they'll come back and you will reward them. And thankfully, that suggestion did not get any further, did not leave the floor of the Senate Assembly there, because nobody seems to know what they're doing in Nigeria as far as addressing the issue of insecurity is concerned. So anyway, of course, President Buhari has been criticized in the manner in which he has handled the insecurity in Nigeria. And in April 2022, President Buhari claimed that Nigeria is more secure under him than it was under Jonathan Goodluck's administration. I think he was saying this after former President Jonathan Goodluck criticized him. So Buhari, at that time in April 2022, said that the security situation in Nigeria has improved under him, under his watch, than the administration of former President Goodluck Jonathan. The president stated during a meeting he was having with the National Executive Committee at his party headquarters in Abuja. The president noted that the major security challenges have remained in the north central and northwest, saying the northeast has seen relative peace. The claim by Mr. Buhari comes in the midst at that time in April last year of worsening insecurity in the country. So insecurity in Nigeria has worsened. We all know that under President Buhari's administration, as the country has witnessed some of the bloodiest attacks in its history, and almost every geopolitical zone in the country has suffered from one attack or the other, and notably outfits that carry out these attacks are Boko Haram, ISWAP, and sometimes I think the IPOB members have also been accused of this, and bandits. So by him coming and responding to former President Jonathan Goodluck in this manner, I think it went to show that President Buhari, because there's a time I think he said he'd not been in public for a while. So he came out and said, hey, I thought we had already solved the issue of insecurity. So I wondered, where has the president been? Because if he has been watching anything in the news, then he would know that Nigeria's insecurity has only gotten worse. And that was about 3 years ago. And so that could show you how President Buhari, and he has been accused of being quite aloof and not being in touch with the issues that affect Nigerians. So for him to actually say that Nigeria has been very secure under him compared to President Goodluck Jonathan in April, and then in August he coming to say that the security challenges in that country is becoming very difficult to handle because the government, the deployment of security agencies and the national resources has been overstretched. That tells you of a leader who does not even know what's happening in his country. He's completely out of touch with the security situation in Nigeria, and he is the commander-in-chief. So if I was living in that country, honestly, I'll be worried for my own security. And in July 2019, Jonathan Goodluck, the former president and ex-secretary general for the Commonwealth, Emeka Anyaoku, expressed worries over the high level of insecurity in the country following the activities of the herdsmen, kidnappers, bandits, and armed robbers, which at that time had claimed many lives. Jonathan, former president, and I'll quote him, this is what he said: "The issue of insecurity must be approached from a different dimension. We cannot continue the old way because it is getting out of hand, and we hope the federal and state governments will do something about it." The former president advised the government to create a special security unit to fight banditry and kidnapping. I think that's when he went and launched this NCMD. But still, that was many years later, because this was in July 2019 when former President Goodluck Jonathan was saying this, and this NCMD was launched in August 2022. So count for yourselves, how many years later was that? So something important here that I'd like to underscore, that the former president was saying, that perhaps it is about time that the Nigerian government approached the issue of insecurity in a different dimension, because what they have been doing has not been working. The strategy that the security agencies in Nigeria have been using had not been effective. So can we employ a different means? Can we try a different strategy? Can we do things different? Can we borrow and leave from other countries? Can we seek for help, from a country like the US? And these are the countries that have been successful and have the know-how and the technology, that could help in tracking and fighting this insurgency and these groups that are bringing insecurity in Nigeria. I think that is what former President Jonathan Goodluck was saying. But of course, President Buhari was not very happy about that. And we all remember that very infamous letter that another former president wrote to President Buhari. You remember former President Olusegun Obasanjo, and that letter he wrote that really rattled President Buhari in 2019. And I'll read part of it. "Nigeria is on the precipice and dangerously reaching a tipping point where it may no longer be possible to hold a danger at bay," said the former president in a letter to President Buhari on the deteriorating security situation in Nigeria. His focus in the letter was on Boko Haram and the herdsmen farmers crisis. At that time, it had reached a peak, and his sense of urgency, he says, was palpable. The letter continued to say, "When people are desperate and feel they cannot have confidence in the ability of government to provide security for their lives and properties, they will take recourse to anything and everything that can guarantee their security individually and collectively." And that's exactly what has been happening. So this letter was written in 2019. And by last year, I saw some governors talking to their people and saying, "Hey, you need to arm yourselves." And I thought, what? When did the responsibility of security of the citizens be handed over to the citizens themselves? They can cooperate with the security operators, they can be vigilant, they can report in case of they hear of anything suspicious or anyone suspicious among them. That is the role that they can do, cooperate with the security forces. But you cannot take the security of the people and leave it at their door and tell them, now, take care of your own security. That is a government that has failed in its mandate. the security of the people and the country lies within the national government. And so several times I've seen, and we've talked about that here before, some leaders, and especially the governor, saying now civilians, you need to arm yourselves, you need to form these vigilante groups to ensure that you take care of your villages and things like that. And this was the part of the contents of the letter by former President, Olusegun Obasanjo in 2019, and they said that if they will take recourse to anything, if people don't feel like their government is providing adequate security for their lives and property, they will take recourse to anything and everything that can guarantee their security individually and collectively. So if they end up taking up arms, who knows? They'll form these vigilante groups, and before you know it, they're also engaging in creating more insecurity, and that is what we have been seeing play out there in Nigeria. So Obasanjo lamented, nowhere was safe in Nigeria was not safe. There's nowhere that was safe any longer in Nigeria at that time, and he was speaking after. He was reacting to an attack then that had happened in 2000, and during that time, I think also in 2022, he criticized the administration. He bemoaned the security challenges. The letter was from 2019, so in April 2022, he also criticized the security challenges that the country was facing, saying they have overwhelmed the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari. And of course, he lamented that no place was safe in Nigeria, and he was reacting to an attack that had happened at that time on that Kaduna-Abuja train that left 8 persons were confirmed dead and 21 other passengers were missing, and a score of others were injured. Now we know that Boko Haram has been one of the key groups that have really fueled the issue of insecurity outside of the banditry and the others that I was just mentioning, and kidnap for ransom and things like that. And the Boko Haram is an Islamic terrorist organization that is based in northeastern Nigeria, which is also active in Chad, Niger, and northern Cameroon and Mali. So Boko Haram, so Nigeria is like their mother's springboard. It is from Nigeria that the group was created. And because Nigeria was not able to effectively handle and just mute it at the right time, it is now spread over some other countries across West Africa, including Chad, Niger, Northern Cameroon, and Mali. And in 2016, the group split, resulting in the emergence of a hostile faction known as the Islamic States of West African's province, that is ISWAP. Founded by Mohammed Yusuf in 2002, the group was led by Abubakar Shekau from 2009 until his death in 2021, although it splintered into other groups after Yusuf's death, and also in 2015 when the group was first formed. Their main goal was to purify, meaning to spread Sunni Islam and destroy Shia Islam in northern Nigeria, believing jihad should be delayed until the group was strong enough to overthrow the Nigerian government. So their intentions are very clear. The group formally aligned itself with the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. The group has been known for its brutality, and since the insurgency started in 2009, Boko Haram has killed tens of thousands of people in frequent attacks against police, armed forces, and it has resulted in the deaths of more than 300,000 children and displaced over 2.3 million people from their homes, and was the world's deadliest terror group during part of the mid-2010s. According to the Global Terrorism Index, Boko Haram has contributed to regional food crisis and other famines. So just a brief background there of Boko Haram. So I'm saying all this to say now that Nigeria is going to its elections on the 25th of this month. And just yesterday, Nigeria's Independent National Electoral Commission warned that the general election could be cancelled if nothing is done to tackle insecurity in the country. The INEC chairperson Mahmoud Yakubu said the commission was ensuring that election personnel, materials and process have the highest level of protection, especially given the current insecurity challenges in various parts of the country. He said if it was not dealt with decisively, the insecurity could ultimately cultivate in the cancellation or postponement of elections in sufficient constituencies to hinder declaration of elections results and precipitate constitutional crisis. He said if it was not dealt with, he called for strengthening of security outfits to ensure the polls are held successfully across the country. And the local media so far has flagged about 15 states likely to experience poll-related violence in the run-up to, during and after the elections. 5 southeastern states, 4 northeastern states, Lagos, Kano, Benue, Plateau, Taraba and Borno states were named as areas to witness election-related chaos. So the insecurity has been so high that now the Electoral Commission of Nigeria is perhaps looking at prospects where the election may not even happen because of the level of insecurity in Nigeria. And this is something that should worry people. So President Buhari, is that why you have been reluctant about dealing with the issue of insecurity? Because if the election is postponed or cancelled, then guess who stands to benefit? Exactly. So I hope that is not the case. But, there has been some incidences that have been worrying. The targeted attacks and burning of election offices and materials also. That points out to something that perhaps is, is being choreographed or is just by circumstances that these offices will be targeted. You know what happened in the elections that happened the last time Nigeria had its elections? The elections was postponed just a few hours to the poll stations opening, and before Nigerians were able to cast their polls, were postponed because of similar incidences to do with insecurity. And it was postponed for another 2 weeks. And that only worked to heighten the level of insecurity. So I think that is something that we cannot afford to put Nigeria through. So I think this is something that the government needs to deal with and put measures in place. And if you're unable to do that, President Buhari, then you can ask for help so that this very important event, this very important exercise in Nigeria's democracy can go on without interference. But I think with how things are going and with the level of insecurity, that is something that we shall be watching keenly and see, is the Nigerian National Electoral Commission willing to go ahead and have the elections anyway, or will it, according to the warning it gave, will it find that the situation is not sufficient enough for an election to be held in the country? And so it's worrying. Things are not well, and I've explained there, things are not well in Nigeria, but we'll see, even as the countdown continues towards the general election that is slated to take place on the 25th of next month. And of course they're having the presidential election, they're having their Senate elections and other local administrative, I think, elections there are meant to be happening there in Nigeria. So a lot is at stake, and so we'll see how President Buhari handles this issue. But he has said that other federal elections, including election of the House of Representatives and the Senate, will also be held on the same date as the presidential election on the 25th, while state elections will be held 2 weeks afterwards, and that is on the 11th of March. So a lot is at stake, and especially lives here are at stake. So hopefully the government will put measures in place to ensure that the people of Nigeria are safe, even as they gear up towards the elections. But going by the alarm that is being sounded by the Independent Electoral Commission of Nigeria, there is a possibility, if this is not brought under control, that elections could be postponed or cancelled altogether. But we shall be here to see what happens. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. This has been Diaspora Dispatches. My name is Miriam Ogotu. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.